Mr. Jason Beck.
How are you today?
I'm doing fantastic.
Fantastic. Thank you for having me on.
Well, thank you for jumping on. I really appreciate it. So Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I just said no worries.
Yeah, so I wanted to do a quick introduction, but considering your depth of experience in cannabis, I don't think a quick introduction is possible. So I think the best thing is to kind of ask you how you got involved with cannabis from advocacy perspective and you name it. It sounds like you have a very rich history. So tell us a little bit about how you got involved.
Well, so I started smoking cannabis at around the age of 13, and I have cerebral palsy. And the first time I smoked cannabis, I noticed that I was able to, at least I felt like it, able to move a little bit more freely,
Really?
as well as I was able to process my thoughts and voice my thoughts much more thoroughly and directly. So, I've always kind of had used cannabis for medical side since I have cerebral palsy, but nonetheless, at that early stage, I didn't really know I was using it for a medical purpose. I just knew that it helped me feel better.
Right. At that point, you were self-medicating, but now there seems to be some evidence that it actually helps with cerebral palsy. Is that correct?
Say that again?
There seems to be some evidence that it does help with cerebral palsy. Is there any studies done?
Oh, yeah. There's no studies because the federal government won't pay for that kind of stuff yet. But I'm very hopeful that in the coming years that will all change. And
do you feel that the THC portion helps, or the CBD, or do you feel like they work synergistically to help?
I think CBD is an important thing, but I'm only an advocate for cannabis-based CBD. I'm not an advocate for hemp-based CBD. I totally believe in the entourage effect and that you have to have the entourage effect in order to get the actual benefits of CBD. So I'm not a proponent or a fan of hemp-based CBD. I think it's all just snake oil.
Really? So you think it's not as effective or at all effective?
I don't think it's at all effective, but what I do think that the cannabis industry has gotten the best free PR campaign from industrialized hemp as CBD.
Oh, that's interesting. That is very fascinating. Wow.
Yeah, like we got the cannabis industry got a free marketing campaign from hemp-based CBD more than I think the cannabis industry ever even realizes or understands quite yet.
Right. Well, it's a very complex political environment. Tell us when you got involved. It seems like you have been an activist for some time. Tell us when you got involved with activism and what motivated you. Sorry.
Yeah, I've always been that way. I in essence basically turned a pager into a storefront. I got a store in San Francisco back in 2001. Back when the only way that you could get a store is if you found a landlord that would rent to you, and then basically I got the permission from the district attorney to be able to open. This was long before permitting or anything else like that. We actually worked to create and enact the actual permitting structure that actually exists today currently.
What year was that?
Well, I started in 2001, and technically we've had medical cannabis dispensaries in California since 1994, and that's 2 years prior to the passage of medical cannabis Prop 215 in 1996. Now, in 1996, that was the first year that I was able to vote. I turned 18 that year, and I knew that if cannabis passed, that was going to be my career path going forward.
Did you get involved with cannabis professionally at that age, or did you do something else?
Yeah. Well, I like I said, I turned a pager into a storefront.
All right. So you had no doubt that this was your life's passion from the beginning.
Yeah. I was always building up my clientele list.
Awesome. Well, tell me about what you think of people that maybe were not as brave to jump into cannabis from the beginning. They did other things, but they've been watching on the sidelines.
We could always call it stupidity, too. We don't have to call it bravery.
But so I'm sure there's people that are listening that have been kind of watching on the sidelines and they want to get somehow involved with cannabis. What do you think? What do you recommend? Do you think that they should still pursue it, or is it too late now?
100%, 100%. I view it as that we are only in the first inning of as far as the real infancy of the industry and so forth. And there's so many different growth opportunities available to up and coming entrepreneurs that this, in essence, is what I call the new American industrial revolution when it comes to cannabis as well as hemp. And I'm a big proponent. I'm a strong believer in hemp. However, I believe that everyone is using hemp for the wrong uses. I don't believe that hemp should be extracted for CBD isolate. We should be making fabrics, textiles, paper, fuels, all of these other different type of incendiary uses that could really benefit us as a country overall and give us a real upper hand in being able to supply all of our own energy and be energy reliant upon within a resource that we all have here in the United States.
Is it possible to use the biomass after the isolate is removed for all the uses you mentioned still?
Not really. Not after it's gone through that type of a process.
Okay. And apparently, from what I understand, the hemp that you grow for CBD is actually a different cultivar than the hemp you might grow for fabric, for example. Is that accurate?
What I would say is this is what they're really trying to say is there's certain hemp-based strains that produce more CBD isolate than others.
Right.
I wouldn't say that one is better for X, Y, or Z. I would just say there's certain ones that you probably do maintain higher yields than others on. Just like you would with any other extract, like if you're making a BHO extraction, there's some strains that you have higher yields on than others. Same thing if you're making ice wax or rosin or any different type of extraction, different strains, when you manipulate them different ways, will produce different or higher yields depending on the extract process.
Right. What's also amazing is that in the past 10 years, we've seen such a growth in this industry, right? We've seen so many different products coming to the market, but as you mentioned, we're still in the first inning. So there's so much more potential that we haven't even explored. And the more people actually join the industry, the more that we can look forward to an evolution. So we're kind of 100%. Building this thing together, right?
100%. And so one of my things is what I try to tell people is that we're not really seeing the full potential of hemp. And one of the main reasons for that is because we don't have the type of manufacturing facilities that are built to be able to extract hemp, to be able to create all of these different incendiary uses that we have available to produce with hemp.
Right. So the more people get involved, the better it is for everyone, correct?
Yeah. Like I think the biggest growth segment is going to be in creating manufacturing facilities to process hemp, but to process them into these other things. So like, let me just give you an example. Before World War II, you were frowned upon if you were a farmer and weren't producing hemp. And there was a whole major campaign that was grow hemp for the war. And that's because all of our naval vessels, all of the rope on the naval vessels actually was made out of hemp.
Really?
And there's a thing that has happened since then. So ever since we've gone to a synthetic material, that is basically a thing called snapback. And that injures a number of our Navy men and women every year, a large number of them. And basically what happens is the synthetic nylon fiber snaps when the ships are docking, basically. And so because of the pulleys and things on the ships are so tight and pulling that rope so strong, this never happened when we used hemp-based rope on the ships, and only started happening once we moved to synthetic fiber.
What is that called again?
Snapback.
Wow. And also, we see the effects of plastics in the oceans all the time, right? That wildlife get caught in it all the time, and that's something that's just not biodegradable.
Well, yeah, exactly. And plastic in the oceans is not really the number one producers of plastics in the ocean is India, China, and I forget what other country over in that area. And that needs to be dealt with. And I think with us being able to produce all these other different types of products and uses, that will just kind of transcend on with those other countries as well.
Do you think we can be the leader and they will follow?
Yes, 100%. 100%. We're the leader in everything else, and everyone else follows anyway. So yeah, of course.
I like that. That's great. Well, people that have been sitting on the sidelines now can get to enjoy a lot of activisms that people like you have done. So tell us a little bit about the work you've done with prison reform, and I know you've worked on safe banking. So Tell us how you got involved and what you've done.
Well, so with the criminal justice side and stuff like that, I'm part of 4 different nonprofits. One of them is Freedom Grow at freedomgrow.org. And Freedom Grow collects money from individuals who donate, of course, and 100% of the proceeds go onto the books of nonviolent cannabis offenders who are serving life in federal prison.
Life in prison for cannabis.
Yep. And a lot of these people, too, the charge isn't going to necessarily say life in prison for cannabis. But what happens is because the federal government is so prosecutorial heavy, basically what happens is that a lot of these people, because they don't snitch, they end up serving life because they didn't snitch.
And all
so
they had is a joint.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to say a joint, but some of these people didn't even consume cannabis at all.
Wow.
Like, for example, one of the persons was a mechanic at a body shop, and there were some cartel members that had their car repaired at that body shop. And because he didn't want to participate with DEA as far as entrapping or doing things to the vehicles that the cartels were having them fix, they brought him in as an accomplice, and he's currently serving life in federal prison.
Wow.
This is a guy that had a totally separate business, totally unrelated to cannabis whatsoever. And because of DOJ's prosecutorial stance and how they manipulate people into basically kind of like basically this thing has always been tell on 3 and go free.
Are you open to wholesale legalization of all substances?
I don't advocate for that, but I think that it's much smarter for us to regulate substances than to just outright deny it and say people can't use them when you're not going to be able to stop people from using things.
Right.
But I do not advocate for other substances. I only advocate for cannabis.
Right. But it seems like our society in general is suffering from the war on drugs. That there's been not a lot of good that's come out of it.
Exactly. So the other groups are Can Do Clemency Foundation, and that group basically identifies inmates who are eligible for clemency and then helps them through the clemency process. That group was founded by Amy Pova, who was actually granted clemency under President Clinton. Then I'm also on Mission Green with Weldon Angelos, who was convicted to 55 and a half years for selling some cannabis along with a firearm. And his sentence was actually communicated, and he was granted clemency under President Obama. And he was extremely instrumental in getting Senator Mike Lee from Utah on prison reform.
So is there a law nowadays that would forgive, I guess, people with minor criminal offenses, drug offenses? Are they still eligible for parole, or are they still going to be stuck in prison even though weed is essentially legalized in California?
That's all. That all depends on the jurisdiction, and it's all case by case basis.
So there are.
That's very.
There's still.
There are people. There's still people that go to jail for weed. Yes, today. Yes.
And there's still people that are stuck in jail because they had past weed offenses.
Correct.
What's the number you think at this point?
Well, let me go into the other group. And so the other group that I also work with is the American King Foundation with Alveda King and Angela Stratton King. Alveda was the niece of Martin Luther King. And with the American King Foundation, what we do there is we help inmates that are coming out of prison re-enter the workforce, as well as the American King Foundation was a big moving force in the passage of the First Step Act.
It sounds like you have a passion to help people that are incarcerated. Is there anything personal that happened to you to incite that passion for you?
Well, I just view it as kind of part of my duty as far as me as being part of this community and have been what I've gone through my whole life. Like, I've been incarcerated numerous times for cannabis over my life, but at the same time too, I've been able to power through and keep forging on, and to be able to continue to create opportunities for people that are like me. And so that's one of the things I really like doing, and that's one of the reasons also too that I got into it, is because I wanted to be able to create an industry that I knew all of my friends could benefit off of, even though I knew that they weren't capable of holding traditional 9-to-5 jobs.
Right. Well, thank you for all your activism and all your work. I don't think we'd be at this stage of legalization if it hadn't been for people like you that really paid the price, right? Right. Gone to jail for this plant that should, by all means, be legal, right?
Yeah, not exactly, and not to mention too, I've also been raided 3 times by the federal government, and so like I definitely have witnessed a lot of different things down the road as far as how this all has developed and played out, and that's one of the main reasons too that I founded the GACC, the Global Alliance for Cannabis Commerce, which is a C6 federal trade organization for cannabis. We currently represent over $1 billion worth of industry, and that is the organization that we lobby through the federal government side. And we have also released, you can check on our website, globalcannabiscommerce.org, a model legislation of what we have written and developed as far as what the U.S. would need to pass in order to have a robust cannabis economy to rival Canada, Mexico, and other emerging European markets.
So tell us a little bit about that. What do you think we need to do, and what are we doing wrong?
Well, one of the big things is a lot of industry people are all rah-rahing about the States Act. And the reality of it is that the States Act, it gives Americans a false sense of legalization, because the States Act does not legalize cannabis. Really? It just says that DOJ isn't going to go after anything that stays within a state. And actually, the States Act would actually reinvigorate the war on our minority communities as an unintended consequence. And no one is understanding or realizing how this would really play out. So let me go into the States Act a little bit so you can understand what it basically does. People that are for the States Act will say that it legalizes cannabis and that it allows for banking and things like that, none of which are actually true. Because of the fact the States Act does not remove cannabis from the list of controlled substances. It does not take it from the Controlled Substances Act. So therefore, it does not legalize cannabis. It does not fix 280E reform, and it does not fix banking, because you cannot fix banking with a rule of construction. It's basically designed to where the banking law gets challenged, and their hope is that the court takes it in a favorable court, and then they get a favorable ruling. But the reality of it is there's so many different financial guidelines and codes that have to be reworked and have this strike from that language, that struck from that language, in order to actually allow for banking. So it doesn't do any of the things that people want it and expect it to be able to do. What it does do is it gives Americans a false sense that things are legal when they're not. And all it does is it gives DOJ and DEA clear and present jurisdiction to go after anything that crosses a state line. So now, in the dawn of legalization where we're at now, every legal product has a state moniker as far as the state that it was produced in. Are you familiar? You know, California has the leaf with the, you know what I mean, with the exclamation mark. Every state has its own individual iconic marker.
Oh, interesting.
Now prior, if you're caught by law enforcement with flour in a plastic bag, it's always assumed by law enforcement that it's procured within state.
Correct.
But now let me paint this picture. I live in California. I go to the store. I'm going to go to Vegas, and I bring weed from California to Vegas because I'm going to Vegas and I don't want to pay their inflated costs over that the store is charging Vegas. So I'm going to bring my own stuff. Mm-hmm. Well, I get pulled over on the way to Vegas, and I have all my weed in my glove box with my registration. As soon as I open up my glove box and law enforcement sees those California state monikers, you are instantly guilty of a Class 4 federal felony for interstate commerce.
Wow.
Okay, and law enforcement will definitely go after that.
Wow.
Okay, right now, because we have the Rohrabacher-Farr Amendment, which is now called the Blumenauer-McClintock Amendment. That is the federal appropriations bill that prohibits DOJ from extrapolating funds to go after medical cannabis and medical licensed cannabis. And when you write an appropriations bill, they have to be written so broadly that is the reason that they're not allowed to go after adult use either, is due to the fact that DOJ can't even spend money to investigate if a product is adult use or medical. Does that make sense?
So I guess the confusion is, why are they fighting this so hard, tooth and nail? Obviously, thousands of people are dying annually from opiate overdoses. So why prosecute? Essentially, the only death that you hear in relation to cannabis has to do with illegal vapes that were made incorrectly. So why not, from a public health perspective, make sure that we can channel all the cannabis use through legal channels where it's regulated and clean, so we can ensure the safety of our population?
It's actually far, far more complicated than that. So right now, the fact of the matter is I think we all can agree that legalization is going to happen. But what's more importantly, you have 36 states, and what's more importantly is how it happens. So let's just say something like the States Act passes today. Okay. And now, basically, that would give FDA full reign over cannabis. So FDA has already called drug procurement on CBD. Are you aware of this?
Right. So tell us more a little bit.
So drug procurement means that FDA has already passed a CBD-approved drug called Epidiolex. Mm-hmm. And so it is federally illegal for any company to market CBD on a product or make any type of claim of CBD on any type of packaging.
Correct.
Otherwise, they're guilty of drug procurement violation, which carries a 3 to 5 year federal sentence. Correct.
But that's true of any natural supplement.
No. The FDA has drug procurement on CBD because they have an FDA-approved drug that is CBD called Epidiolex. They also have FDA-approved drugs for THC. So let's just say legalization happens. What everyone is failing to realize is that we have the Food, Drugs, and Cosmetics Act, because cannabis is a food, a drug, and a cosmetic. And so the reality of it is that we have to have a comprehensive legislative strategy in place to be able to combat that. Because otherwise, what is going to happen is that we're going to have legal cannabis, but there will be no legal products available on the market because none of them are going to be able to pass FDA scrutiny to be able to be on the market.
Interesting. Do you think
they will all be all adulterated products, every single one of them? And in our model legislation, we actually have a legislative fix for that using the past pharmacopoeias, because cannabis used to be in the American Pharmacopoeia prior to 1937.
So how do you propose that we circumvent that?
We propose a 2-track system, one for medical use and one for adult use, because we want to ensure that we are able to make sure that veterans, indigent patients, and so forth, and people that seriously need it for certain medical conditions have the ability to be able to have insurance reimbursements from that.
Insurance for medicinal or insurance for pharmaceutical grade?
For medicinal.
Medicinal.
Yes. No, for medicinal. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what is the support looking like for that?
It's amazing. Support is very strong, especially amongst our veteran community. It's extremely strong, and it's been a very viable topic piece that we've had in a number of different congressional offices that has definitely resonated. A lot of these members, when I talk to them about this, a lot of this stuff really resonates with them, and they haven't really had these types of in-depth conversations because industry hasn't really addressed them or addressed these important topics yet, and that's why the GACC is so important.
Why do you think industry hasn't addressed it yet?
Lack of leadership, lack of knowledge,
right?
Lack of really understanding, and really lack of foresight.
Right. I think a lot of what you've proposed here is pretty complex, and it comes from the depth of insight you've had into the industry for the past many years, right?
Yeah, exactly. And at the same time, a lot of people are kind of preconditioned to, hey, you know what, we just want legalization, da-da-da-da. But no, what's more important is how legalization takes place, because that affects how everything happens.
Definitely a lot to think about. How would you like people to get involved?
They can go check out our model legislation. If they are part of a cannabis company, we encourage them to sign up and join on as a membership and join along in this fight with us. as well too. We able to share really valuable knowledge as far as if you know where government is going, you can base your business strategy a lot better on knowing what government's going to do as opposed to taking a reactionary measure once government has enacted whatever government is sent to enact.
Okay. Do you have?
And so it's really a way to be on the cutting edge and to really understand the nuances that go into actually creating safe and viable products, as well as the overall creating the public safety mechanisms that need to be in place from a governmental standpoint to ensure customer loyalty and just overall brand protection for all of these different brands.
Right.
Because a lot of these brands are being knocked off and sold on the illicit market.
Yes.
And so industry, we need to come up with viable solutions that actually address this. And so we have actually recently partnered with one of our member companies called Solo Sciences, which is a BioTrack kind of labeling product that is able to identify and batch number product and that you're able to scan, as well as it has push button recallability feature.
So it sounds like you are a proponent of track and trace. Would that be an accurate assumption?
It depends on the format. It depends on the form that it is.
Do you approve of the proposed system in California and how they're executing, or do you think there's a better way?
The current, I know that the state is not happy with metric, and I'm not a fan of metric. I think metric is incredibly cumbersome and very low on productivity and doesn't actually do the job that it's intended to do. Metrics was created by the people that created the inventory controls for Walmart, not by anyone from actual industry that understands the nuances of how industry actually works.
Right. So there is a better way? Is there a better proposal?
Yeah, there's tons of them. I encourage everyone to go and check out Solo Sciences, solosciences.com.
And they have a better way of tracking where the product is coming from and going.
Exactly. And at the same time too, it's much more cost effective from a financial standpoint. So then that way, because ultimately all these costs go onto the backs of the consumer, and so it's very low in cost. So then that way, it's not going to be all of a sudden you're going to go in for a product one day and see this label on and see the price increase, because we're talking about cents, not dollars.
So let's say someone has acres of cannabis. How would Solo Sciences tackle tracking the product?
Now, that's so Solo Sciences tracks product when it's being produced. It doesn't track it as far as on the cultivation side.
Okay.
That's a totally different thing. And we actually have a different technology that we hope to talk about in the near future that is actually basically works kind of like as basically a spray to basically be able to biologically identify if something is from a regulated place or not.
What?
It's basically like it's a genetic marker.
Oh, that's interesting. So how do you feel like, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, please.
I was just curious what you feel about obviously there's a lot of genetic modification involved with a lot of different strains. How do you feel about that?
Well, genetic modification is how we find all of the amazing strains that we have today in all reality. So I'm in favor of it. I'm not for what you would call like, I want to be careful with the wording because a lot of it kind of gets misconstrued and mislabeled and stuff like that. And so, but the reality of it is that we have to have these types of advancements in sciences and things like that in order if we want to continually having these different types of products.
It sounds like
it's a necessary evil.
Right. Well, it sounds like it's not that genetic modification in itself is bad. It's that how it's done, it can be good or bad, right? So if you make something
correct.
Be relying on
it's more
Roundup,
about the intent. Yeah,
clearly not good.
Exactly. It's more about the intent of the company that's actually doing it. Right.
Do you think Monsanto? Sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
Do you think Monsanto is going to play a big role after legalization in cultivation?
Monsanto's already here. For the tobacco industry, they're already here. Big Pharma, they're already here.
Here.
They're already in the cannabis space. They're already here. So all these people are like, oh, we don't want these people. The reality of it is that that's how industry advances itself.
Right.
So it's like I was having a conversation with a friend the other day, and we're both from the old school industry, so to say. And we were having the conversation about investors coming into the industry. Mm-hmm. And he's totally against having investors. He feels that that's kind of like selling out. And I had to tell him, I said, that's not. I said, you should look at it in a different space. I said, you should look at it as that the industry is evolving. And this is part of the evolution of the industry in order to carry us going forward. The reality is that cannabis hasn't had the significant business side really come and play like a big role yet, because it's been everyone kind of, having their own little thing. And, we're all from one different kind of individual segment, not from like other prior big industry.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like for myself, I've never had a job. Right. I've never been in the workforce other than selling cannabis.
Lucky you.
So, yeah, like this is all that I know. Right. You know what I mean? I didn't come from a Fortune 500 company and then now I'm in a cannabis company.
Right.
But I think that's a good pairing to have people like myself, as well as with the people that are coming into the industry from the financial side, be able to have strategic partnerships and alliances with them, because we need them and they need us.
Yeah. If anyone has watched the industry for the past several years, there was definitely a big difference from the moment California legalized cannabis, because I remember going to conferences and you would talk to people and they were always very, very nice, but there was no follow-up and there was no professionalism.
Yeah.
And the minute legalization happened, suits showed up and they weren't as cool or as nice as the OGs that you would meet. But my goodness, if you talked about something and you planned something, it got done. So there was a definite difference. And I think it really added into, as we say, the evolution of the market.
Exactly. And we totally need that. We totally need that. And anyone that says that we don't, I just feel is kind of a little bit out of touch with what is really going on. But at the same time, I want to help them to get through whatever their qualms are about that and help them to see a brighter side of the sun, so to say.
Right. Yeah.
Because it's only going to financially better them in the future, because all of the people that I know that are in that position all keep saying how it just keeps on getting harder and harder to keep going on. And that's because they're not taking advantage of the opportunities that are in front of them from the financial world.
Well, also, too, there seems to be a very burgeoning illegal market, especially in California. Mm-hmm. How do you, what are your thoughts about that? What do you think?
Well, I think that, for one, I think that the state didn't really help us out a lot, in the sense of where, so like, for instance, LA, you're not allowed to have a volatile manufacturing facility. But yet, all of these companies prior to legalization had a volatile manufacturing facility somewhere in Los Angeles.
Right.
And a lot of those people had to go and get permits and different stuff, and now have manufacturing in other cities, other municipalities. Mm-hmm. How many of those people do you think are realistically playing both sides of the fence and keeping their own manufacturing open for illicit market while keeping their new manufacturing open for legal market? And we just saw that case in point happen just in the news yesterday with Cushy Punch.
Cushy, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so industry needs to decide what industry wants to be. If industry wants to be a trapping market, then they should stick to trapping. And if industry wants to grow and become part of the new white market and transition from the gray market into the white market, then they need to do that. And they need to decide what horse they want to ride on.
So you feel like as people that are actively in cannabis, we can basically forge ahead and we can dictate our own destiny?
Correct.
Okay. Well, it sounds like we've done quite a bit with the federal government and the state government in terms of legalization. So it seems like we have had a voice and we've had a lot of influence. So
that is very true, very true. But it's really important that industry speaks with a solidified voice, and right now it's too fragmented because there's too many people that have too many bright ideas but don't have a real way to actually get them implemented.
How do you think we can unify those voices?
It's just going to take time and messaging.
Yeah.
It's really it comes down to that.
So I noticed your organization has global in it. Do you work outside of the United States?
Well, some of our companies are global companies. So for one of our companies, member companies is DNA Genetics, and they are a genetic seed company, and they actually have interest in every single country that has some type of legalization in place. They have cultivation interests in all of those different municipalities. So they're already, so for instance, they're Canopy Growth's cultivation partner.
Right. Okay.
Canopy Growth also exports to almost a number of European countries already.
Fantastic. Well, I guess what I was concerned about was essentially Philippines, because a lot of people are getting essentially killed for cannabis offenses. And what I heard is that there's actually a cannabis conference that's happening that hopefully will change the culture in terms of how cannabis is viewed in that country.
In what country?
In the Philippines.
Oh, in the Philippines.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's one of those problem countries. Yeah.
Right.
And there's great, also too, Thailand. There's great things that are starting to happen in Thailand and things like that. But those countries are definitely farther down the food chain, I would say.
Right. But the fact that someone can actually get executed for possession or consumption of marijuana is mind-boggling to me.
I mean, it happens in a lot of countries. You'd be surprised. Yeah. Indonesia is another one of those countries.
Right. And it's just, for me, it's heartbreaking because I've seen and I've read instances where 19-year-olds are getting executed publicly for consumption of a joint.
Yeah.
So we are extremely lucky in this country that we've had a political voice and we've had a movement, and I just hope that we can take that movement globally.
Just another reason why America truly is the best country in the world.
Yes, it is.
The real reality is that my story isn't able to happen in any other country other than America. I was homeless from 15 to 21, and I turned a pager into a storefront. Wow. That story cannot happen in any other country other than America.
Maybe we can help change that around.
I'm all about that. I'm all about that. But we have a lot of work to do here first. And it's kind of a thing. It's kind of like the situation when you're on an airplane. And, when you're on an airplane, they tell you to put on your oxygen mask first and then help others.
Right.
Well, America needs to put their oxygen mask on first, and then we can go and help others.
I like that. America, put on your oxygen mask.
What's that?
I said, America, put on your oxygen mask.
Exactly. Because we're going to pump it up with weed smoke.
I like it. Exactly. We're going to hotbox the whole country.
Yeah. Inhale, exhale, just like you're at yoga class. Big, deep, full breaths.
Hey, I'm all about that. As a yogi, yes, let's go for it.
Yep. I love it.
Fantastic. Well, I know I asked you a lot of hard questions and you shared a lot of insight with me. Is there anything else you want to share, or is there any advice you have to motivate other people to get involved, become an activist, and just make their voices heard?
I think one of the biggest things, realistically, is for people to know that on the thing is how bad the States Act is, and to not support the States Act. And the main thing, too, from just kind of like a little one-liner about the States Act, is the States Act is a protectionist act. It is artistically written to humper down state lines to therefore capture market share within these different states. So then that way they can keep prices artificially high. The only way that we get to the place to where we can actually stamp out the illicit market is through interstate trade and global commoditization of cannabis.
Are there
it's all about scale. It's all about scaling. Okay, every industry is scaled to where the cost of production is as low as it possibly can be in order to maximize efficiency. Like, you don't see people standing on a corner trapping milk because it's not financially viable for them to be able to do that.
Right.
And we need to get to a point to where cannabis is at that place.
Are there
And
any,
that's how we eliminate the illicit market.
is there any legislation that's addressing either one of those concepts, the interstate commerce or global trade?
So the only thing that does is our model federal legislation, which you're able to view on our website at globalcannabiscommerce.org.
Okay.
It's available to view in our policy section. There's also a section by section available to view, so you don't have to read all 78 pages of that.
We appreciate
There's a summary. There's a 3-page summary also on our website.
Perfect.
That outlines it section by section.
We'll include that link also on the notes for the podcast.
Oh, that'll be fantastic.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Well, this was a great conversation. Thank you for being genuine and open and talking about all of your experiences. It was very eye-opening for me to hear your perspective. And of course, if there's anything else, let us know. But yeah,
Awesome.
It was enjoyable talking to you.
Thank you so much for your time and spending your morning with me. I really appreciate it, and I hope your listeners find this podcast to be a wealth of information for them.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.